Following behind Black Kid with the rerun in 2023 of the Cyber Kitty Kuro-Chan collab, and getting his turn with the Tuneup Treatment too. It is CKC01 MieArmy, REGRADED, with the kit of Deathlock, Sword, Unsuccess, Biped Legs, and the leg ability of Battle Stance, which buffs all leg stats minus armor and heavy limit for every successful dodge or graze completed. Now, compared to Black Kid, who focuses more on an aggressive form of shooting-based combat, MieArmy, on the other hand, focuses on a much more all-rounded sense in the form of melee-based damage, but can still make his point very well known across the board once he hits the field. Deathlock is a negative ailment that, once applied to the enemy, will hit them with a no dodge and no defend penalty, guaranteeing all hits will land and be critical hits on top of that, but on top of that will also inflict them with a 25% debuff to their heat and cool. So not only will they be guaranteed hits and guaranteed crits, but the enemy will also be going notably slower than they were before as long as the effect is in place. The only real weakness to this, of course, is anyone using Stat Cleanse, which makes this largely ineffective as long as that is on the field. Sword is a very basic and conventional melee skill you can generally never ever go wrong with using for its incredible balance and all-roundedness across the board. Good damage, good armor, heat and cool. It's a skill you can always use anywhere with great flexibility very, very easily. Left Arm of Unsuccess is a very rare ailment in the sense that we've only seen it once, and that is on MieArmy, with no reruns of this since. But simply explaining, much like Deathlock, it also is a negative ailment, but once applied to the target, it will debuff their success stats by 50% as long as the ailment stays in play. That means that if the enemy already had a relatively hard time trying to land a hit, say with a success of 400 or 500, this guarantees they probably will not be hitting anything at all. And that also ties into his leg ability of Battle Stance very, very nicely, as this means the more dodges or grazes that MieArmy is able to successfully complete, the higher his leg skills become, making him more of a threat. He's faster, tankier, and he's more likely to dodge the longer he's on the field and the more times this effect is allowed to stay active. Now, when it comes to his tune-up treatments, MieArmy kind of took his basic all-around kit and made it just a little bit better, kind of tying up some of the loose ends that held him back a little bit. His head has access to plus 300 to armor, plus 200 to success, and plus 200 to heat. Now, naturally, with negative ailments, you definitely want to bank on that success skill, because if the ailment is dodged or grazed, even if they take the damage, the effect will not be applied. So that easily goes without saying you want to focus on success as an emphasis point for upgrading Deathlock. Behind that, heat is also nice too, as this guarantees that he will be notably faster running to the line to inflict the skill. His right arm of Sword has access to plus 300 to armor, plus 50 to heat, and a damage plus bonus of an additional 30% damage unlocked when triggering pierce damage. Now, armor, of course, means it's very good for him to stay alive just a little bit longer on the field than he was before, but damage plus, of course, much like anyone else wielding basic sword with the tune-up treatment, is the big go-to you want to focus on, as this means that whenever you're dealing conventional damage, you not only will have no cooldown penalty, but you'll be dealing additional punish damage just because you broke something on your turn. His left arm of Unsuccess has access to plus 100 to success, plus 200 to power, and heat and cool have access to a united bonus of plus 100 each. Now, much like with his head part, when it comes to ailments, you want to focus on guaranteeing that the hit will land and not be dodged or grazed. So that goes without saying that you want to focus on success as a big emphasis point for that one, and heat and cool behind that will also be a nice bonus, as this guarantees that when he's going in to use the skill, it will be notably more likely that he can outrun the opponent and get it on them. Naturally, one of the other big weaknesses to Deathlock and Unsuccess is anyone using Stat Cleanse, but if that is not a factor in the fight, this can be a very useful skill to be utilized. His legs have access to plus 300 to armor, plus 200 to evade, plus 50 to mobility. Battle Stance gets an additional 10% when active and triggered, and of course S rank on prairie terrain, much like any other biped leg. Now, normally when it comes to legs, I tend to focus with an emphasis on armor or mobility, but given that the MieArmy has the leg ability of Battle Stance, which relies on him dodging or grazing, it goes without saying you definitely want to put a higher emphasis on that stat behind the Battle Stance bonus. Now, the extra 10% or so he'd already be getting at base is nice to have, but honestly, if it goes between a 10% bonus and a 20%, it easily goes without saying that those bonuses will stack and be very, very noticeable the more likely he is to dodge a lot of attacks. Now, taking into effect his old pure set and mixed parts scores, I originally had him graded at a 7.5 for his pure and an 8 for his mixed. Primarily that his kit had moderately good synergy with itself as a very dodgy kind of melee kind of kit, especially focusing with a heavy emphasis on the dodging, between massively reducing the success rate of enemies, and Battle Stance boosting his leg stats for every dodge that he completes successfully. And between Deathlock and Sword, he can also punish anyone that gets in his way just for using a basic skill with no real cooldown penalties. Taking these into effect with his upgraded stats and his upgrades, I would have to bump him up to an 8 for his pure set score and a 9 for his mixed parts score, making him a very nicely sought after and well-rounded collab model that you generally can't ever go wrong with using. Compared to most other collab models that got the Tuneup treatment and maybe got bonuses to success or power, or made them more aggressive or powerful or game-breaking than they were before, MieArmy instead tends to focus on being more versatile and all-rounded, which means he's a model you really can't ever go wrong with using once he's on the field, be that as a pure set or as mixed parts.